Okay, this brings to order the public portion of the City of Fairway Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Monday, April 25th, 2023. I want to say to those that have matters before us tonight that before we move to your matters, we have a few housekeeping things we have to take care of, first of which is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. And I want to, first of all, ask everyone here on the panel if you've received the minutes and if you have had a chance to review them, and if so, the chair would entertain a motion for the Eck residence at 6109 Howe Drive to encroach 10 feet into the minimum 40-foot setback for a porch as submitted by an architect, Laura Bowers of Low Design, on behalf of Steve and Lee Eck, the property owners. And so, Kim, first of all, I'd ask you, before I turn to Basil, I would ask you, have the adjoining property owners been notified, and if so, what do we have feedback-wise?
Yes, Chair. Boz, I was out of the office, but Boz let me know that the notifications were sent. It was also published in the legal record. I've not taken any comments.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll turn now to staff to see if there's a staff report regarding this issue.
Yes, Chair. In front of you is the staff report, and the applicant is seeking that variance, and I'll let my staff as submitted, pending any questions.
Okay. My understanding is that staff is not supportive of this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And could you outline maybe for us a couple of the reasons why you think that a variance is not appropriate in this situation?
Basically, the issue is the code, the building line is 40 foot. All the properties are platted at 35. So the code does allow you to encroach for an open patio entrance, 7 foot, and then Planning Commission can grant a 10-foot exception. With this scenario, if Planning Commission grant that exception, there's a note that it has to, you still have to maintain the building lines for the adjacent properties, which in this case, it's exceeding up to 8 feet. But I think to that garage is at the 35-foot line. Then they're just covering that area, and then it's extending it and looping it towards the garage.
Where's for the garage? That doesn't. I mean, that's going back toward.
That's going back, so that's not an issue. It's just the 5 foot in front of the building line.
I don't know if it's a question for staff or maybe it's for zoning counsel Anna. Since I'm fairly familiar with Reinhardt Estates building limit line, since I sit on the HOA design review, I chair the design review for new construction homes going into Reinhardt Estates. So 35 feet seems to be typical. I know the Fairway zoning ordinance is at 40. So which one would supersede, because it's a private deed restriction established in the 1940s compared to a newer zoning ordinance that was done more recently. So I don't know which one would supersede.
Platted setback supersedes.
Okay, so the 35 foot in this case would supersede to 40. Okay, so we're really talking about 5 foot encroachment, not 10. Okay, I just want to clarify that. Okay.
And the 10 foot would be like, I would interpret the code as 10 foot off of the 40 foot setback that Planning Commission could do. So, yeah, it's not 10 foot off the 35.
Okay, but right now we're looking at 5. Is it 5 feet?
That's right.
Okay.
And because the code does say you cannot go beyond 30.
Okay.
So they're at 35, and they can only go to 30.
Board Member Ho, I would add that while planning can grant that exception up to 10 foot, It's only if it is in line with adjacent properties, and those, the properties immediately adjacent on either side, neither one encroach that far.
What you're saying, the other ones, I didn't look at the other homes, they're not at 35 feet, they're at,
They're at 35,
Right.
but they don't have
oh, a front porch that would,
an entry feature that then further encroaches. And so that exception that planning can grant, it's specifically to a unenclosed entrance feature, a porch, as long as the others in the exception language for planning. That's why they have to seek a variance.
oh, okay.
And it's because this is the roof is what causes the
No, I mean, it's still unenclosed. I mean, the sides are open. So the roof has nothing to do with, I mean, if there is no roof, they can do concrete, but once you put a roof, then that's part of the feature of the entrance feature, which is allowed, which is unenclosed porch. So it has a roof, but the walls are, or the sides are unenclosed.
And I've just pulled up the language that the exception for planning, and this is why they can't grant this. Up to 10 foot into the front setback with a maximum 200 square feet within the front setback. And then it goes on to give that the encroachment results in a setback, building line, or other structural encroachment similar to immediately adjacent property. And so the adjacent properties don't have that similar encroachment.
I have a question for Kim. Kim, in that last statement that you made, if you were the first one to ask for an encroachment, say of 5 feet, your adjacent properties would never have had it before you. So basically what the code is saying is you could never grant an extension because there's no way of ever getting one because the neighbors had never had them.
Not from planning commission.
From us.
I'm sorry, one more time, ma'am?
Not from the planning commission,
But from who?
From us.
the Board of Zoning Appeals.
From us.
If you find that the five conditions are met.
Tell them it's okay.
So we can tell them it's okay.
Right.
So
And the
that-
next
so
one,
th- so
the
that
next
leaves-
one could go through planning commission. The
Yeah.
neighbor to the north or south of them could go
Right.
to the planning
So
commission.
that leads to my next question. Have we ever granted, and I haven't been here much more than a year, have we ever granted a 5-foot extension?
Not that I can recall, but none have come across
No.
this board before, and I've been on for 7, 8 years.
But whether we have or haven't in the past is not really relevant to this. We don't really operate on a precedential basis. We have to apply the 5 factors to each application and decide whether or not the statutory criteria have been met.
Which leads
So-
me to my third question on this blue sheet that we were given.
Yes.
Is, please tell me if I'm out of line. Hopefully I'm not. I'm trying to learn. The first item, I don't understand.
So here's how I think we, first of all, let me ask, are there any more questions of staff from the board? Okay. If not, then I think what we'll do is we'll now turn to hear from the applicant or the applicant's representative, at which time they'll walk us through the blue sheet, and then we'll be able to ask that representative the questions. So that's probably how. So hearing no more, if there are no more questions for staff, then we would ask if there's anyone here to speak on behalf of the applicant. And if so, would you come forward, give us your name and address, and then what would be very helpful is to maybe give us an overview of what you have planned, and then in particular, we need to be walked through your answers to the 5 questions, because that's the only legal basis we have upon which to act.
Yes, got it. My name is Laura Bowers. My address is 7327 Summit Street in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm an architect. I'm representing Stephen Lee Eck in this matter. And so regarding the just overall goal of this project is to add a small unenclosed entry feature onto their existing house. So That's kind of where we're starting from. We actually started this process last year, and the main question was whether the building line versus the front setback, is a little muddy. And I believe there was a case last October wherein just up the street from you guys at 61st and Howe, they were allowed to exceed the building line. So after learning that, we realized maybe we had a shot at getting a variance for our project. So the first question, the variance requested arises from such condition which is unique to the property in question and which is not ordinarily found in the same zone or district and is not created by any action or action of the property owners or applicant. And then what we said is the presence of the front building line on a plat is not addressed in the Fairway zoning language. If it was treated similar to a front setback, the proposed entry structure would be allowed because it would be only encroaching 5 feet past the front setback, which in this case is the building line. And then the second question is that the granting of the permit for the variance will not adversely affect the rights of the adjacent property owners or residents. And we don't think it's going to have a big impact on the neighbors at all. It's relatively small in scale. I don't think it's going to change anybody's views from their home or sun patterns or drainage. And if anything, we think it's going to improve the aesthetic of the house and the neighborhood. So then the third question is the strict application of the provisions in the zoning ordinance for which the variance is requested will constitute necessary hardship upon the property owner represented in this application. So the overall goal in providing front porch is in large part to improve the aesthetic of the house as it is. They would rather not have to make humongous major renovations to the house or scrape the house to get it to look a little bit different. We're just trying to make it look more welcoming, have a little more architectural definition, and do that while staying within the scale of the classic Fairway home. And then that the variance, number 4, is the variance desired will not adversely affect the public welfare. Again, we think it's going to be a benefit to the block. We think it's going to be an attractive addition, and I think a front porch invites community and neighborliness, so we think it's going to be a positive thing for the public welfare, in other words. And then the last question is that granting the variance desired will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance. And so our response to that was the goal of the homeowner to add a primary entry structure limited to 30 feet from the front property line is in keeping with the aesthetic and zoning goals of the city of Fairway, which recommends such features. So we are mostly requesting clarity on the nature of the front building line.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
I still have a question on item number 1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand legal. I mean, it sounds like you think that you should be allowed to have the 5-foot variance based upon the language that you've used. I mean, I'm asking for clarification if that statement is a true statement or not.
You mean, like, does it sound like I'm saying it already is allowed?
It says the presence of the front building line on the plat is not addressed in the Fairway zoning language. Is that a true statement?
No.
Not a true statement.
No, they're considered, it is addressed in the what is it called? The the dimension standards for lots. The minimum front setback is identified as 40 feet, but there's a small a, that's superscripted for a footnote. And it says lots with existing front setbacks of less than 40 feet, which this would be, are eligible for status as a non-conforming lot and may be eligible for exceptions with regard to future additions to the principal building. So it's addressed in that regard. It's not that it's totally silent on platted setbacks that are less than.
Okay, not being a lawyer and understanding all the legal terms, that sounds very vague.
It is, but it's with respect to when you look at exceptions for how far things can encroach into the front setback and what planning commission can authorize, we look at the minimum front setback, not that set by code, which is the 40 feet. We don't look at the, as much as the platted setback. So if they can allow up to 10 foot of an encroachment, then that would, again, that's a minimum of 30, but it has to meet other requirements and that's why this didn't go before the planning commission. So when you analyze it, you look at these findings.
Okay.
And uniqueness, the first criteria is about, rising from a condition that is unique to the property in question and not ordinarily found in the same zone or district and not created by an action or actions of the property owners or applicant. They didn't plat it, so they didn't create the situation. But, it's also, the other properties in the area do have the same platted setback. So you just have to, there's play in the conditions to allow you some flexibility in decision making.
Okay. And historically, we have, I think, considered uniqueness from a historical perspective. For example, how property usages have evolved over time, how homes evolve over time. They're small lots, small houses. People want to live in them, want to improve them. So to some degree, we've had a more flexible definition, Bill, historically, of kind of what constitutes uniqueness. And clearly, as Anna says, these homeowners didn't do anything to create this situation. They inherited this. And so we kind of come up with antiquity versus modernity here and how we get to, the right place, but still be consistent with the kind of structures we want to see in Fairway, I guess I would say.
So let me go to the second sentence, if I could get some explanation. It says, if treated similar to a front setback. Can you explain somebody explain to me what that part of that sentence means?
So, and I'll have to refresh my memory because I haven't looked at the code recently, but if this house were built at the 40-foot setback and we wanted to have a 5-foot front porch encroach upon the setback, that would be allowable. But our building is built to the 35-foot building line instead. So when the building line trumps the setback, obviously it does because the house is further than the minimum required front setback. I guess the question in my mind is, does that become the effective front setback or no? Because if you considered it, now the front setback is 35 feet, then a 5-foot encroachment would be allowable. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
And it's, that's why we're
if
here,
what
because
you're saying,
it's a bit muddy.
Yeah.
And, I had a lot of conversations back and forth with Basil about what is and what isn't allowed, and so that's why we're here.
I'm just trying to find out what the true statement is, but it sounds like there's a lot of ambiguity in the code and how we could interpret it.
Any other questions of the applicant?
The question that I asked the staff, what you're proposing is the little porch as opposed to exist.
Could you maybe walk us through? We've got it up
Sure,
here. Why don't you
yeah,
walk
I'd
us
be
through
happy to.
so we know what what exactly you're planning.
Yeah. I don't know.
Kim, if you go to the first one,
Yeah. So,
right there.
yeah. So here on this plan, that gray shaded part of the roof would be new roof, additional front porch added onto the front of the house. So it extends out 5 feet and continues to meet the driveway almost, and then turns back. And that's connecting a covered walkway to the side door of the house and the garage and the parking area. So you can see in the plan, we have a gabled entry that lines up with the front door, and then a sloped roof around the side. If you go to the elevations, I can explain that. So what you see here, the gabled roof and the roof next to it is covering that 5-foot front porch. And so you've got steps down the front, and then the steps down the side you see there are existing. So we're just connecting the front to that side door over there. And then if you look at the next elevation over,
Here?
yes, that elevation. So you can see from the side how those are connected. So it's extending out just 5 feet, but returning all the way back to the existing roof of the house. And then if you scroll down to the plan, yeah. Well, and then here in 3D you can see currently the front of the house is just flat. There's nothing beyond that the largest gable. And so this is visually what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think there are a couple other perspectives too, just to make it crystal clear.
Is there anything else you'd like to point out? Because I don't want to cut you off if you have other things you'd like to say.
No, I mean, I think our goals are pretty simple. We're just trying to make it look nice, and I think it's in keeping with the spirit of the Fairway zoning code, and we're just trying to get these ambiguities resolved to see if we're able to move forward.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant?
I have one more question. This is completely different. This is in referral to the large shade tree. Now, I walk by the property, says they live about 3 houses from there.
Ah.
I did not encroach on the property and go there, but it looked like that shade tree is very close to what you're building.
Yes.
So my question is, the foundations that you're putting in for this would have to be 3 feet deep. Is the foundation all the way across the front of the house where it would be cutting off all of the roots?
We haven't designed the structure yet, since we're not sure if it can be allowed, but we will probably do piers instead of a full footing across the front of the porch, so that, I mean, for ease of digging, if nothing else, and to maintain the health of the tree.
That
We definitely do not want to lose the tree.
That would be one of my requests, is so that we don't encroach on the trees, the piers, and then the structure itself would be supported on the piers.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so all you've got is your 18-inch pier or something like that, which should not affect the tree itself.
Precisely.
Okay.
That's the same question I had, so thank
Okay.
you, Bill, for asking.
you.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. Anybody here to speak about this? Please come forward and give me your name and address.
Hello, Steve Eck, 6109 Howe Drive, owner of the property. Laura did a good job of describing what we're trying to do. We've lived there for 15 years. We love living in the city of Fairway. We've had lots of construction around our house, mainly complete teardowns, major disruption to the entire street, the block, everything. Our goal, if we've lived here for 15 years, has been to continue to, again, this is a home that's been here for a long time, if not one of the original homes in Reinhardt. So we have added things within the house, but then also added a garage as well. And our intent for living here is continue to live here as long as we possibly can, and continue to take advantage of the house that we love, but then just not tear it down. I mean, that's our intent. We want to continue to try to figure out ways to make it look nicer for ourselves, but ultimately for our neighborhood. And we think back in an original design, an architect also recommended this back in 2013. We did not go through with this, but we just think now is the time to have a more opening area in the front that we can hang out and actually have more conversations with neighbors as well. So the intent is just continue to try to beautify our home without having to tear down and continue to just take advantage of the historic context of the home. So that's it. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any questions of Mr. Eck? Okay, so at this point, we're going to close the public comment portion of this meeting, and now we'll turn to the board here to deliberate and discuss what we've heard. So I guess, Peter, I'll start with you. You're on the end to give us your thoughts.
I guess looking at this, I would draw the parallel with the 40-foot typical ordinance, for homes that were in the 40-foot setback, and then now, people in those homes may want to add something like this, a simple open kind of enclosure for the front entry and a small wraparound porch. So based on that and the 5 conditions here, I think the applicant has met all 5 conditions.
Bill, thoughts?
I guess my thought on it is that the addition to this house is aesthetically pleasing. There's no comments from the neighbors that have been raised. It's almost identical to the house being built right next to mine, with along the side and across the front. And I would welcome walking by this as an improvement. So all 5 conditions have been met.
Thank you. Marcia?
Well, I'm in favor of granting the variance. I think it's an acceptable way to update an older house and still have it fit into the neighborhood. So I feel the conditions have been met.
Amy?
I think you guys have met all 5 criteria, and I'm happy that you are adding rather than tearing down and rebuilding.
Patrick?
When I first read the 5 conditions, I was confused as Bill was. What in the heck his first answer was? And I appreciate the answer that that's the only question I had out there. So I agree with the person who's already spoken. This is an open division of that house. It's real plain on the front, and it's going to make it even better.
So at this time, the board would entertain a motion to approve the application for variance subject to the 3 conditions set forth by staff, and we would add a 4th. That a condition of the variance would be that the homeowners...
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the variance is passed, and I want to thank Ms. Bowers and Mr. Eck for a very succinct presentation. And I do appreciate, even as a lawyer, I appreciate the difficulty people have grappling with how to answer question number 1, because it's not an easy or straightforward thing. But I'm glad that the statute and the board has flexibility to, I think, do the things we need to do to move our community forward. So thank you all. Now, it's time for my favorite motion. There's no more business, is there, tonight?
No more business,
Okay,
Chair,
so my
but I
favorite-
do want to point out, we do have application already for May 22nd, so back-to-back
Wow,
meetings.
back-to-back. Haven't
Wow.
had one since August.
So at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.